Okay, I gave tonight's lesson a title. It's Wisdom, Understanding, and the Building of the House. You'll find that the spirits of wisdom and understanding are coupled with building. And we're going to look at 3 places where this is happening. First of all, you see the spirits of wisdom and understanding in the beginning, when God is building the dwelling place for the man and the creatures. And our second place that we'll look at is in the building of the tabernacle. And then again with Solomon's temple, but we won't go there tonight. And then we see wisdom building her house in Proverbs. So those will be our three sections for tonight. And we'll begin with building the dwelling place for man and creatures in the beginning. Now, I had those backwards. When we started this, I showed you this template for what we were going to be going through. And we've done the 7 days of creation, and now we're beginning on the second row, and we are going to cover both wisdom and understanding tonight. And you see that in the columns that those line up with day 1, which was in light was separated from darkness, and day 2, when the upper and lower waters were separated, and that expanse was created in between them, called the rakia. Consider days 1 and 2 as the building of a house. And that house on the next 4 days will be filled with living things like plants and fish and birds and man and beast. Wisdom is there in the beginning beside God as a master workman. Proverbs 8:22, and we'll be going all the way to 31. And this is a description of wisdom there at the start. The Lord created me, wisdom, at the beginning of his way, before his works of old. From eternity I was established. From the beginning, from the earliest times of the earth, when there were no ocean depths, I was born. When there were no springs abounding with water, before the mountains were settled, before the hills, I was born. While he had not yet made the earth and the fields, nor the first dust of the world, when he established the heavens, I was there. When he inscribed a circle on the face of the deep, when he made firm the skies above, when the springs of the deep became fixed, when he set a boundary for the sea so that the water would not violate his command, when he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was beside him as a master workman, and I was his delight daily, rejoicing always before him, rejoicing in the world, his earth, and having my delight in the sons of mankind. We see these spirits of wisdom and understanding moving on days 1 and 2. And if you look at Proverbs 3, it says, the Lord founded the earth by wisdom. He established the heavens by understanding. Now, day 1, day 2, the foundation and the heavens. And then in Jeremiah 51:15, it says, it is he who made the earth by his power, who established the world by his wisdom, and by his understanding stretched out the heavens. We're going to take a look at some words for the word for understanding, and then some words. They're kind of in the same family in Strong's. They're right next to each other, and I'll show those to you in just a minute. But you're going to see this similarity. And the reason why I read you Jeremiah 51:15, and I bolded that line, that by understanding he stretched out the heavens, is you'll see the words for the space in between. Remember, the rakia is the space in between where we dwell, between the upper and lower waters. The word for that in-between space, the word for is similar to the word for understanding. And And also, I think it's also the word for between. So let's take a look at these 4 words and you'll see, maybe you'll see what I'm talking about. I wanted to first look at the bottom word. It's the most dissimilar. It's the word for build, and it's bana. Very similar to understanding, which at the top, which is bina. So we got bina and bana. Look at the Hebrew letters for those. There's one letter that's different. So you see the similarity there, understanding and building. And remember, my title was Wisdom, Understanding, and Building. And we're looking at three places where wisdom and understanding build. So we have the first term, bina, and understanding. And then the second one is bayin. And the second and third, if you look at the Hebrew, they're the same, except for the vowel points. That second one is an interval or space between, and that's why I was referring to the rakia, or the expanse in between the upper and lower waters. And I probably explained this pretty well already, but some of the language, I was just going to cut and paste Genesis 6 and 7, but it wouldn't, unless you look at the Hebrew interlinear, you're not going to see this. And I couldn't even just copy any English translation and have it work. And then I tried to copy the interlinear, and it just showed up as a whole bunch of boxes stacked on top of each other. So I'm just going to point out where this word is, this second one down, the bayin, or the interval, the space in between. You have it in verse 6. He said to divide among waters from waters. And some translations will say divide. It doesn't work to say divide from waters from waters. And so you understand how that doesn't work in English. It doesn't flow. Okay, it'll just say divide waters, divide the water from the water. But there's this among word, and that's that between word, that space between type of word. And then in verse 7, it says, and God made the rakia and divided among the waters which were under the rakia from the waters which were above the rakia. So there you have that word happening. And I understand how that would be a hard thing to translate, because it's this between idea that doesn't, this is among, from, separating idea. But I just wanted you to see it there on day 2.
Why? How does it relate? Why is it important that we understand something that's in between, in the midst?
Because I wanted to familiarize with the idea of understanding having to do with separating one thing from another. And that is when you get your third one here, which is discerning. And I'll give you an example of discerning, being able to separate one thing from another. Okay, and so do you understand how conceptually these are starting to fit together? This idea of understanding, discerning, separating one thing from another, and why that would also be the word for that space in between two separated things. Okay, now this discern word, I wanted to give you an example. Distinguish an object that doesn't belong. Discernment. I wanted to talk about a snare. I don't know if you've ever watched a survival show or if you've ever seen someone try to set up a snare, but tell me if I'm describing this right. What you'll do is you'll take a twig or a small branch, some kind of tree that's growing there, and you'll take that and you'll bend it. And that's where your tension, your spring comes from, is that you've bent this. And then you use a rope or a wire or some other kind of thing, and that's the actual part that's going to grab the animal by the foot when it triggers it by stepping into it. So that is the part that you'll hide. And what I wanted you to think of is the one piece of the snare, the twig part, that belongs in the environment. Okay, that the animal's not going to be too alarmed by that. Whereas if it saw the rope piece, it would avoid that. That's why you're hiding that. So you've got one thing that belongs and one thing that doesn't. And a discerning eye, even though it can't see the thing that doesn't, will see the twig that's bent in a way that it shouldn't have and discern that there's a problem there and want to go around that. And I think if you were to think of just not just like an animal walking through the field or the woods, but us walking through the world, that sometimes something looks like it belongs, but it's bent just a little, and it's probably attached to something that's going to grab you. And before you know it, you're caught. And the harder you tug, the tighter
I think
it grabs.
That's an awesome observation. It reminds me, a couple of years ago, we were talking about, I don't remember what the context was, but we were talking about being able to discern the truth. And that comes from having a really intimate familiarity with the truth. And I think that's where so many people sometimes can err, is by seeking out error instead of seeking out truth. Error becomes really apparent when you have the truth. That's why they don't teach tellers at a bank how to identify counterfeit bills. They teach them how to identify real bills. And we talked about that a couple of years ago. It's like you need to understand the truth so well that when something weird pops up, you're like, oh, well, automatically you become very familiar with the fact that that doesn't fit.
That doesn't belong.
That doesn't belong.
And that familiarizing yourself with the truth would be a way to develop the spirit of understanding, so that or discernment.
Right.
So, and that's what as we go through these, Alan's voice kept echoing, so what do we do? What are we going to do about that? I'm like, I don't know. I just know this stuff. Just let me say this stuff. Why do we have to talk about practical use?
Really?
Yeah, that's half wisdom, which is like being too smart by half. Okay. So this third one we were looking at, the discern that we were just talking about, that's the one used that is the root of the word used in Jeremiah where he says by his understanding he stretched out the heavens. That's at the root of that understanding, that discernment, separating things into categories in order for there to be a nice space in between where life can flourish. So that space in between where the life is, where all the critters are, where we are, that is our house. That is his house. What am I talking about? The Proverbs 14:1 says, the wise woman builds her house, but the foolish tears it down with her own hands. So what does that mean, to tear down the house with your own hands? To tear down your dwelling place. This house that we've been talking about, the big house, the planet, it got torn down once, pretty good. And it's kind of related to what we've been talking about with separating the upper waters from the lower waters. At the flood, you had the upper and lower waters fail to stay separated. Remember that it was both when it says the fountains of heaven broke up and the deep. So you had both. You didn't just have rain for 40 days. You had it coming this way and this way. So that livable space that was created in between the upper and lower waters was now not inhabitable. And if you think about this, the upper not failing to remain separated from the lower, and you remember your Bible story about the flood, ask yourself, why would the upper and lower waters fail to remain separate? What had happened when you read that story? What was happening right before those came back together, where upper and lower were not kept separate? Yeah. I'm thinking, what I'm getting at, I think, is what man did. Because a lot of times what man does here, our sin, I think, can determine the nature of the judgment. And here you had what was described as mankind mingling with the sons of Elohim, the upper, the spiritual beings mingling with those below, mankind. And so because of their desires, the upper and the lower had not stayed in their places, and they had mingled. And so now in the flood, you have, it's almost like they wanted to do that, but they didn't realize the full implications of mixing upper and lower. You mix upper and lower and you think you're having a good time with this, and it's to your advantage or for your pleasure. How about if we just take that all the way and we mix back what I separated as upper and lower? It's a picture of, you do that and it's death. You cannot survive without his discernment, his categories that he's created. We need to keep things organized the way he wants, and so that, that's important when you're reading through his instructions. Things that belong here and there, and the way he's very wise. He knows what he's doing, and we don't want to mess with that because it could be deadly. So, how do we keep from being foolish and tearing down our house? How do we acquire understanding and discernment? I have a few examples here. I think acquire wise counsel right at the start of Proverbs is a start. I think it's very good to be close enough with at least one person that and where you have a type of trust in between you, where you can ask them for counsel. And receiving counsel, I don't have a lot of practice at that because I avoid that because that's not fun. And so my first reaction is always, and defensive-ness. Why? No, it's right. Why are you going to tell me I'm wrong? But then I think, and I have spent most of my life just stopping there and being defensive. But I think the more you trust, if you can elicit counsel from a person you trust and learn to receive it. It doesn't have to be that they're always right, but you need to be gracious about receiving it so they'll continue to give it to you. Because if you react very defensively or poorly or even just shut down when you're given counsel, that person will realize that's not worth it to go there. I am not going to touch that spot again because that is her nuclear button and we just don't go there. And so you could live your whole life surrounded by people who just won't give you counsel in certain areas because of the way you react to it. Lou, get the microphone.
Well, when you respond to somebody, respond means not reaction, but responding in a responsible manner. And if you just remember that, I always remember that. I'm just like you. I'm always defensive. But if you respond to somebody, that respond means to respond in a responsible manner.
And, if your first reaction is to be defensive or emotional, you can develop some little thing to give yourself a moment to take a breath, like asking them to clarify or asking them a question about what they said, to give your heart a minute to calm down. Your fight or flight response that's going on when you're confronted with that. You need to develop some graceful way to just give yourself a second to respond in a good way.
Years ago, when I thought I knew stuff, and maybe
Everything.
I was right. Maybe I was right. Well said. But I kind of challenged this guy who said something I thought was just kind of dumb. You know, he's a little bit older than I was, and he just broke my heart. He said, "Pray for me, Jim. I'm struggling," and nobody had ever been that honest with me before. You know, and I felt horrible. I just like, wow, I'm a jerk. You know, I'm a judgmental prophet type guy coming at this guy, and it's just full, you know. And nobody had ever done that or ever since, really.
Yeah. It's
Just made me realize
there's
foolishness.
There's an art to giving counsel, but I think we all practice that a lot more than we do receiving counsel. You know, giving advice, that's easy, right? Taking it, well, clearly, because how many times has someone actually taken your advice?
I can count
Really?
it on one finger.
Okay, so receiving it obviously is harder. Thank you.
What is that?
No, I'm serious. No, which finger is that? No, it's not that finger. No, I guess she's absolutely right, though.
Yeah.
For whatever dumb reason, people ask me for my opinion on things, and I often give it, and I think I'm right. But apparently I must be wrong because they'd never take my advice.
This isn't from the Bible, but I'm sure there's principles that support it. That is the saying that a smart person knows what to say, but a wise person knows whether or not to say it. And so if we can try to get that in our head, like there's lots of times when I think, oh, I know what to say here, but it's taken his spirit over the years of correction in me to go, it's not time to say something like that. And it's not, is it going to breathe life into that person if you do say it? So there has to be a point and a reason and edification for whatever you're saying.
And these three, the last one there, the one who withholds his words has knowledge, and the one who has a cool spirit is a person of understanding. And that's Proverbs 17. Velma?
I think a lot of people that seek out counsel because they are lost or don't know the right choice to make for their life or their path, live in fear. They're afraid to be honest about what's going on in their life. And when they share with people, they're afraid of what that person will do with it, or they'll be judged. You really can't give someone something that you don't possess. If you're like Christ wanted us to be loving and kind and generous, forgiving, if that's really part of you, most of the time, if that person keeps coming around you and asking, it's because they see that in you. And maybe they aren't receiving it right away, but you've got to be long-suffering and keep trying.
And patient.
And patient.
Yeah,
Patience
because
is
don't
not
say,
an easy
well,
thing.
I already told you what to do, and you just won't do it.
No. Yeah, you have to. It's how you serve the food, whether someone eats it or not.
Yeah.
Well, in James, doesn't it say to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger?
And he also said, let he who... Something about asking for wisdom, but not...
Oh, yeah. Jimmy and I both talked about that a couple of years back, where it was like, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives generously and without reproach, and it will be given to him. But let him not ask with any doubting, because the one who doubts is like the serpent's seed, driven and tossed by the wind.
And that's not to... That's. I think that's more, that doubting is more about, like when someone comes to you for advice, but what they're really doing is they're wanting you to side with them.
They're wanting you to
and when
validate
you
their
don't
opinion.
say what they wanted you to say, then that's not. And there was someone that came over just a couple months ago, and he was clearly eliciting a support for his, and he was doing it in a way that was like I don't know, it was blatant. And I just looked at him and I said, you don't want to know what I think of that. And that was it. They ended the conversation. And he didn't ask because he knew that I wasn't going to say what he wanted. And he wasn't like, oh, no, I really want to know what you say. No, it was done. So, and you know what? It takes experience. And I'm just now starting to maybe figure out every once in a while when it's one of those situations where don't bother. It's not even,
Yeah,
it's not what's happening
In fact,
here.
it can come to the point where you giving them the proper biblical wisdom can be the wrong thing to do. If you know that their heart's not right, you know that they're going to do what they want to do, you could be screwing them up if you tell them, here's the right thing to do, because now they know what the right thing to do is and they didn't do
And they're
it.
not going to do it.
Then they're responsible for it.
Yeah.
So it takes a great amount of wisdom and discernment on our part.
Especially when
To
we know
know.
exactly what they need to do. I can tell you, I
Yeah,
know.
that's when it becomes really hard, when you know exactly what
Yeah.
they should do, but you just know they're not going to do it, but you really want to say it anyway so you can be right.
Yeah.
Did you know that the Lord's telling you not to?
Yeah.
Yeah, you really have to, you know what, it comes a lot from the same book of James, slow to speak. You can do really well by keeping your mouth shut and listening. That's a magical skill that
Withholds his words.
not
Yep.
many of us have.
Well, the problem that we all have is we're not very good listeners.
No. No.
Tracy?
So, okay.
My dad gave me some really good advice once, and that was just how Messiah says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So if you're silent enough, people will tell you what's in their heart. They'll tell you, if you're talking about work all the time, that's what's in your heart. If you're talking about your family all the time, that's what's in your heart. Whatever it is that they just go on and on about. But if you're talking over them, you're not going to know. And how can you counsel, or how can you know how to respond if you're not listening to the need? And there is a proverb that says, a wise man hears a word before he responds to it, something like that.
And it's going to be in the Proverbs where you're going to find that answers the question, how do we acquire understanding and discernment? And in the Psalms. I included a couple others here. The unfolding of your words, capital Y, of your words gives light. It gives understanding to the simple, to the naive, the one who doesn't understand. I opened my mouth wide and panted, for I long for your commandments. Those are those words that give light, that give understanding. And then Proverbs 14, leave the presence of a fool, or you will not discern words of knowledge. So there's all sorts of, the entire Proverbs, we could have just read Proverbs tonight. It's all these little couplet kind of stanza things throughout it that are, words of wisdom.
The Proverbs is one of those perfect books where if you have the audio Bible, play it as you're falling asleep. It'll only play for about an hour because it's not that long. And it won't, like if you try to listen to the book of Genesis as you're falling asleep, you'll wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and it's still yakking. But the book of Proverbs is that perfect length where it'll stop after about an hour. But I'll tell you what, be prepared for it because it scares the crap out of me. I'm telling you, you start
Proverbs
listening, you're
is
like, oh, this
scary.
is great, man. All
Yeah,
kinds of
I
wisdom
know.
in Proverbs, and then all of a sudden you realize this is not good. This is not good at all. I have no wisdom. I'm a fool. And it really has a lot to say about the Messiah Yeshua returning and judgment for the fools and recompense for the wicked and safety and peace for the righteous. It's like, yeah, this is some serious. The book of Proverbs is some serious business.
Yeah, it is.
Proverbs 8 is the personification of wisdom.
We are going to talk about that.
Well, I'll let you talk about it.
Mike was just saying Proverbs 8 is the personification of wisdoms, and Angie said we're going to talk about that.
We are going to spend some more, we're going to do another discuss like this when we get there. Wisdom, this next section is the building in the tabernacle. Wisdom, understanding, and the building of the tabernacle. in the wilderness. And I wanted to ask you a question. Just kind of think about this in your mind. What is the difference between intelligence and wisdom? Think about that. Is there a difference between being intelligent, and by intelligent I mean like knowing a lot of stuff, and being wise? I think we've kind of hit on that. Is there a difference between being foolish and ignorant? Okay. And I think the difference between those lies in the action. The works, the fruit that pours out. I think you can have such thing as a intelligent fool. What do they call that? A sophomore? Sophia is intelligence, and moros is a wise fool.
Sophisticated morals.
Yeah, the Greek. And this, we saw this when I was teaching. It was a lot of times, I taught for 15 years, and I was the person I sought counsel from that I trusted the most, who was complete opposite from me. It was really good that we had the relationship that we did. She had been teaching for probably 25 years, and she had all these little quips of wisdom. And one of them was that the AP kids, you know what I mean by AP? The advanced placement, the really smart kids. She says, she compared AP kids to being intelligent fools. She said, you know, you either get intelligence or common sense, but you just don't get both. I was like, well, that's really sad, because don't we want both? And it was based on some of the decisions that these kids would make. They could do great on a test and the SAT and write a paper like nobody's business, but when it came to everyday life, they would do some of the most stupid things you've ever seen. It was really difficult. He had an AP class, and they were the most difficult kids because of just, yeah, too smart by half is what he called it. We're calling it an intelligent fool. I wanted to define wisdom and skill because I think there's an interesting thing in these definitions. First, we'll go with wisdom. Knowledge of what is true or right, coupled with just judgment as to action. Okay, wisdom isn't just knowing stuff. It's what you do with it, like what Tracy said. This word for wisdom, kokma, if you look in Exodus when they're building the tabernacle, a lot of times that word kokma is translated as skilled. It's in there a lot. If you count up all, not just where it says wisdom, but also where it says skilled, you'll see just how much that word is in there. And skill is similar, the ability coming from one's knowledge, practice, aptitude, etc., to do something well. Okay, so there's this action idea there. And if we look at those, let's just look at a couple places. This is where he first brings it up in Exodus 28:3. Moses is still on the mountain, and he's telling him how he wants this thing built. He says, "You shall speak to all the skillful people whom I've endowed with the spirit of wisdom." It's kokma. That they make Aaron's garments to consecrate him, that he may serve as a priest to me. And then a few chapters later, he assigns the lead guy that's going to be in charge of it. It says, "Now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, See, I have called by my name Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, and I have filled him with the Spirit of God in wisdom, understanding, knowledge, and in all kinds of craftsmanship, to do all these things for the temple. And then I myself have appointed with him Aholiab, the son of Ahisamach, very good, of the tribe of Dan, and in the hearts of all who are skillful, I have put skill so they may make everything I have commanded you. So it's not just these two men that are filled with the skill, but as you read on, it's the women that are making the weavings for the curtains, and it continues through there. So they're doing something and they're building something. So he's filled them with skill. And the action for these skilled craftsmen in Exodus was the building of God's dwelling place. And it still is, if we are to be a skilled craftsman. Ephesians speaks about the building up of the body, the assembly, being built for the dwelling of God in the Spirit. All right, let's look at wisdom and folly, personified as women and contrasted in Proverbs 9. Okay, first we'll read the section on wisdom, personified as a woman, and then we'll read the section on the foolish one. Wisdom has built her house. She has carved out her 7 pillars. She has prepared her food. She has mixed her wine. She has also set her table. She has sent out her attendants. She calls out from the tops of the heights of the city, whoever is naive, simple, let him turn in here. To him who lacks understanding, she says, come eat of my food and drink of the wine I have mixed. Abandon your foolishness and live, and proceed in the way of understanding. There's a few verses in between the first woman and this one. We're going to skip those for now. A woman of foolishness is boisterous. She has a lack of understanding and knows nothing. She sits at the doorway of her house, on a seat by the high places of the city, calling to those who pass by, who are going straight on their paths. Whoever is naive, let him turn in here. And to him who lacks understanding, she says, stolen water is sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. But he does not know that the dead are there, that her guests are in the depths of Sheol. Okay, both women call out to the naive or the simple, to the one who lacks understanding. The wise woman sends out attendants and calls from the tops of the heights of the city. She's seeking. The foolish woman was sitting by her door on a seat by the high places of the city, calling to those who pass by. She's sitting, waiting for someone to come by, like ensnaring, instead of searching out.
That made me think about, did you want to say something? That made me think about the Messiah, Yeshua, sending out disciples, we're seeking the lost. Whereas this foolish woman is sitting and waiting for people to come to her. She's sedentary. She's laying traps. I liked how she's ensnaring people, and you can't have a moving trap. You're not going to catch any game with you can't go and set your trap and wait 10 minutes and go, gosh, it's just not going to work, and go and set it somewhere else. That's not how it works. And I think the enemy is an ensnarer, and he sets traps, but this woman, the wise woman, is out seeking for those who will listen to her, where the other one is just putting out attractive stuff and seeking to ensnare people.
You can kind of see the two pictures of what Jerusalem was meant to be with the wisdom and how it's established, it's a light, it's a beacon, and they say, come. This is something in the Revelation that says the Spirit and the bride say, come, and he who thirsts, come. So we're saying, drink this water. This isn't stolen water. So there could be a connection with that. Whereas the foolish woman is lying in wait, which is something the enemy does. It's also something a snake does. So they're sin lies at the door, it's waiting, it's crouching, it's waiting for you to pass by. There's other, I'm going to say Proverbs 31 or something else, maybe, I can't remember what it is, but there's another one that talks about this woman and what she's doing, and that, maybe it's 6, that the Torah and the commands will keep you from the wicked woman. And I think that's the same person. And in Revelation, it talks about this Babylon, this harlot Babylon, who's mixed this cup that all the nations have drank of, and her cup is fornication. And this is wine that's making them all drunk. And so that's really what they're trying to do, is cause you to go away from God, mix these ways with God's ways, and that is what Babylon means. It's confusion by mixing. It's confusion by mixing God's ways with the ways of the nations, rather than the nations coming to you in this established way, in this right way that God has established. You're going out and acting like them. I think that's all what this is all about.
Wisdom has prepared her food, mixed her wine, set her table. She's busy. Folly offers stolen water and bread eaten in secret. She doesn't appear to be active. She's sitting. She's going to take it from someone else, maybe. Does that remind you of some foolish virgins?
Not doing the work.
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of a harlot versus a wife. A wife is preparing, seeking things, doing active, while a harlot, what do you normally? They're sitting by the
sitting,
door,
waiting.
coming in. I will treat you, but really they're not giving you any goods. It's
Yeah.
very description of a wife brings life. What does she do? She brings life. She's the life of the house.
Yep.
She also produces life. While a harlot, well, she destroys life. She creates. She only takes, and actually that death, because that, according to the Bible, like when you sleep around and stuff like that with those women, that can be death.
Yeah.
So that's the difference. Really.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You're not looking to have children with her.
No. And she can bring death into a house that's full of life. That too.
Yep. Destroy a marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So, wisdom offers life, and folly offers death. Wisdom has understanding, and folly has none. But they both have a house. The wise woman builds her house, and the foolish woman tears it down with her own hands. There's also a little bit more on this evil woman in Proverbs 7. I just missed chapter 8. I am so sorry. It describes her as boisterous and rebellious again, lurking by every corner. She says this funny thing: I was due to offer peace offerings. Today I have paid my vows. I listened to something in the last week or two that pointed out that she appears to be religious. She says, I have spread my couch with coverings, with colored linens of Egypt, contrasted with of the bride. And then she says this. I've skipped a lot of what it says about her, but I wanted to talk about these first 4 lines. She says, for my husband is not at home. He has gone on a long journey. He has taken a bag of money with him and will come home on the appointed day. That is let me just talk about the translation first so we can get past this. That appointed day is translated as full moon in probably everything but the King James that I could find. But I am taking issue with that full moon, because the only other place that word for appointed day is used is in Psalms. And when it's used in Psalms, this is what it says: blow up the trumpet in the new moon. It says that. In the new moon. Is that a full moon? That's a concealed moon. In the time appointed. This is what they're translating as full moon. On our solemn feast day. When we blow the trumpet on a solemn feast day, is there a full moon?
No, there's a new moon, another thing.
Why would this then say, if they're correct with this being full moon, why would this say, blow the trumpet on the new moon, at the full moon, on our solemn feast day? That makes no sense. Plus, as Tracy, I think, was about to point out, that word right there, the kesa, the gist of that is concealed, and it's the new moon that's the concealed moon. So,
reference to what?
well, yeah, why am I harping on this appointed? He will come home on the appointed day. I'm talking about Yom Teruah. My husband has gone on a long journey. He'll come home on the appointed day, and in the meantime, she is doing really wicked stuff. She's almost like those servants that the wicked servant that begins to beat because his master is gone, isn't going to come back for a long time. So here she is. Not only does she appear to be religious because she's made her peace offerings and paid her vows, but her husband is the one who's gone away on a long journey and won't come back to the point, and he has a bag of money. And that word for money is silver. He has a bag of silver.
I was just going to say, this reminds me of the parable of the talents. That the master comes and distributes to his servants talents and goes away on a long journey. Messiah tells these stories or these parables in similar ways, and even says to us, I'm going away, but I'm coming back. And so this idea that we're supposed to be found so doing something when he returns. But
Busy.
What's that?
Busy preparing.
Right. So he tells he tells his disciples that you're supposed to have your lamps burning, and some people are, when I come back, are going to be beating their fellow slaves, but you need to be feeding my sheep, basically feeding my people, giving them food in due season. So when he comes back, we're supposed to be found doing these things, producing good fruit. And I just want to comment too about you saying that they appear religious, because this is what was going on in Jerusalem in Messiah's day when he was admonishing the leaders in Jerusalem for leaving off some and doing others, making the outside appear righteous, but the inside was lawless and unclean. I've been learning a lot about the fruit that God's coming to look for and that Messiah is coming to establish, and he calls it justice and righteousness. And these two things always go hand in hand together, and they're described as the fruit of Abraham. That's what he did. He did justice and righteousness, and he will teach his children to do justice and righteousness. And the word justice is mishpat or mishpatim, which is laws, rules. These are my mishpatim, these are my judgments, and he'll list them for you. I'll tell you what they are. But if you do those things apart from righteousness, you're leaving off the weightier matters. Justice is a weighty matter, but if you're not doing it with the mercy and kindness and right ruling, right discernment, that it can only come by the Spirit informing those.
You're just checking off boxes.
You're just checking off boxes. And I think that's what we're seeing here. It's like, well, I'm doing it, see? But God knows the heart. He made the outside and the inside. So.
Yeah, well, that's a good observation. I was going to say, this passage here really did remind me again, somebody mentioned the wise and the foolish virgins with the lamps and no oil, or having oil, and this really brings to my mind those several times that Yeshua said that people were going to come up to him and say, hey, Lord, Lord, and he's going to say, I don't know who you're, who are you? I don't know who you are. That's really, I think this is very clearly describing the religious people who are following the foolish woman. They don't have that wisdom that is needed, that discernment that is needed. And I please don't understand me to say, to be like church bashing and saying, oh, they're not following the Sabbath, excuse me. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking about religious people who, I don't care, they could just mouth it, talk about God all day long, but they don't do what he said to do. So casting aside all of the Hebrew root stuff, I don't care if you're celebrating Christmas and Easter and you're, violating the Sabbath and eating pork. That's beside the point.
Well, I think that now you're seeing people who are checking the boxes in Hebrew roots, and
It's
gotten even worse.
Yeah, it's even easier now to check boxes in the Hebrew roots movement, because you're like, man, I got my tzitzit and I ain't eating pork anymore, and I'm stopping work on the Sabbath.
But you are still missing the weightier
boxes.
matters.
Yeah, you're missing the weightier matters. So I think, looking at religious people, there's probably a whole lot of religious people who are going to be sorely disappointed when the Messiah shows up and says, what did you do? You went out there walking around the world yakking about Jesus all the time. People could clearly see what was going on in your life.
Well,
you made an ass out of you and me. And you take my name in vain. You have made a fool of myself and you.
And I think that we can sit here and say this about the theoretical they and them. At the same time, I don't want to be anywhere close to being that. And I realize how easy it is to be like that.
Yes.
So I don't want to just like say this is what other people besides me are doing, because I know my heart, not as well as he does, but I know my heart, and there's still some things I need to be doing with it.
Well, with your gracious permission, I think maybe now would be a good time to talk about that for a moment, because you're absolutely right. I think that if there's anything we can learn from this teaching tonight is we need wisdom. And wisdom is not just knowing what the right thing is, but doing what the right thing is. Because if we know it and we're not doing it, we're hypocrites, period. And I don't mean Sabbath and Torah and all this stuff. I'm talking about the plain up, straight up commandments. And
It's the love part of the commandment.
it is.
Because we can say, oh, I never committed adultery, but
Did you look at a woman
technically
that
I
was?
didn't commit adultery, or did I harm my husband by flirting with the idea and he knew it and it made me harder towards. There's this whole love component to that. And that's when he's saying, you have heard it said, don't commit murder, but I say to you, he's saying level up. This is not about technically doing what I've given you and treating this like it's a legal check sheet. This is about you examining your heart and don't even get close to it.
Sorry, Lou, go ahead.
Well, are we not talking about morals?
Yes. Basically, yes. Yes, absolutely.
Well, the one thing that I've been reading a book, it's called The Story of America, and the Constitution, when they were developing the Constitution, they want to included morals. And so Thomas Paine read all these books and tried to get what person would tell us about the morals. And the one person he found out that did it better than anybody else was Jesus.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I think, man, you guys, I apologize for harping on this over the years, but, it really comes down to some real basic stuff, frankly. How do you treat your wife? How do you treat your husband? Are you honest at work? Are you paying your taxes? Are you the biggest one? Your lips. Who are you talking about? that is the hardest one by far, is controlling your lips. Talking about other people behind their back, period.
Even strangers, like that idiot who just pulled out in front of me.
I know, I have to go. I'm sorry, Laura, I shouldn't have said that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Speed limit too.
And you know what? Here's a really difficult one. And I mentioned this. I don't know, 6 or 7 months ago, maybe. I think I mentioned one of the issues that we have is with politics. When you're out there talking trash about your political opponents, you're speaking Lashon Hara. If you've got your wicked representative in front of you, then you can talk trash. But I mentioned this months and months ago, where I was like, it used to be, I think, where a politician would get up and say, here's my vision for America. This is what I want to do. They don't do that anymore. They say, those people over there are blankety blank, 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 blank. They want to do blank, 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 blank. Who knows if any of it's true?
Well,
Maybe
fear
it
works
is.
really well, though.
What's that?
Fear is excellent. It works really well.
Yes, fear works really
And that
well to demonize
transitions
your
me
opponents.
away from your politics.
And transitions me
Right
right away
back
from
to
my
here.
politics
How-
right to there. Yeah.
How to acquire wisdom and understanding. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. All those who follow his commandments have good understanding. His praises endure forever. One whose ear, switching, Proverbs 15, one whose ear listens to a life-giving rebuke will stay among the wise. One who neglects discipline rejects himself, but one who listens to a rebuke acquires understanding. The fear of the Lord is the instruction for wisdom, and before honor comes humility. Now, last week we talked about discipline, and Lou shared something with Alan and I when the message was over, and it got me thinking. And it's a really good point. He was an elementary school principal, so he had to be the disciplinarian for the children. And he said that in his experience, those children who are disciplined at home were better able to handle discipline that they received at school. They were better able to receive it and to do something constructive with it. And receiving discipline is a learned skill. And I have a couple of examples to share with you to show you this is when I figured out this is a learned skill. When one of my children was very small, probably less than 2, he got his very first spanking. I've told some of you this story, but my mom had this process that she always did with spanking. We got this out, and then we gave you 5 minutes to sit and think about it, and then Mom came in and she said, "This is what you're getting spanked for," and then you laid down, and then she spanked you, and she left, and she let you cry, and then she came back later, and we discussed it again, and we still love you. Well, I tried to follow that process. I took this child who was just a little guy, and he had done something willful, and it was time for a spanking. And I took him into my room, and I did the whole thing. I laid him down on the bed, and I smacked his little bottom, and he popped up off that bed and smacked me right back.
I was the baddest kid around.
He didn't know what was happening. That was a natural reaction. You hit me, I hit you back. What was that for? It was a natural reaction. He had not learned the process of discipline yet. Okay? And so, this is the kid who, when he was in kindergarten, they went out for recess, and when they came in, the teacher couldn't find him. And we got a phone call. "Your son did not line up after recess. We found him wandering out in the field by himself long after recess was over." And he said, "I just thought recess should be longer." He just, yeah. Well, and then another one this is the one extreme of handling discipline. When you get disciplined and you jump up. No. And then there's the other extreme, and I had this kid too, who no matter how small his infraction was, we just weren't disciplining him enough. And he got to the point where he would administer his own discipline. And he would sit there and do that. He's a little guy, and I'm disciplining myself. Or he'd put himself in a corner, or he'd say, "I'm not going to play on my computer for a whole year. I'm so bad." And, not a lot of wisdom there, but, just heaping loads on himself because I deserve it. And these are both human reactions that are not wise. And thankfully, our God is the one administering discipline, and he is wise, and he knows the right amount and the right kind to shape our behavior. But these,
it's kind of like when my little girl ran across the street in front of a car, I didn't wait to explain to her why she got spatted on the back end.
mm-hmm.
And sometimes God does the same things to us. We need to be disciplined quickly. And maybe we don't understand it all the time, but there is a reason.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
Angie and I were talking about that just yesterday, as a matter of fact. That, everything that happens to us is for a reason. Sometimes, I believe, because Paul says so, that all things work good together for good. It doesn't seem good to us at the time, though.
Right.
We don't know what discipline is for, perhaps sometimes. But I think that's a touchy subject to deal with. When bad things happen to me, that's just the way it is, man. I live in a fallen world. Maybe there's an opportunity to say, what did I do to deserve this? And there's a fair to middling chance that you did do something to deserve that. That's something we don't like to contemplate, because we have a tendency to say, I'm covered by the blood of Jesus. My sins can't touch me. I would correct that statement and say your sins will not defile your spirit. You can screw up your life real easy.
Well, I said the wages of sin is death.
The wages of sin is death, but that's what unfortunately some people understand, is that Jesus took away all punishment for your sin. That is not true. It is not true. Otherwise, you would all be blissfully floating on clouds, and every other person on the planet would be going, golly, I want to be like you guys. Your life sucks just like everyone else's. Is it possible that you're doing some stupid stuff to bring damage to yourself? Yeah, absolutely. In fact, very likely. Now, that is not to say, because you can talk about Yeshua going and healing somebody who was sick, casting a demon out of somebody who was sick, and then telling them, go and sin no more, or something else might worse happen to you. They somehow had caused their own difficulty. But then there's that one example, just one, where Jesus says it was neither he nor his parents who sinned. The only example that I'm aware of in Scripture, so it tells me that it exists, but it's not common. So, how screwed up is our life? You know what? Unfortunately, that can be a tell. That's not comfortable to think about. That's not comfortable at all to think about. When people look at you as a Christian and go, your life is messed up. God, you're talking to me about peace and grace, and Jesus can save your soul, and Jesus will help you and build you up. And it's like, well, what's he doing for you, buddy? You're in the dumps. Ain't nothing good going on in your life. You're a shining example of the love of Jesus. That's a tough one to face.
But at the same time, you've got Job.
Right, that's what I was thinking.
Yep.
And how do you fit that in? I mean, I'm not
That's
asking
I
if
know.
God did wrong.
No, of course. And people have often asked themselves, what about Job? Job doesn't seem to have done anything wrong. Well, like I said, there is that one case where Jesus said it was neither him nor his parents. However, let me ask you, you guys are all familiar with the book of Job. And this leads right into, I know, the point that Angela wants to talk about. Do you believe that Job did anything wrong?
Ever?
No, I don't mean, no, I don't, I mean, we all know that Job sinned. I mean, he was a sinner just like anybody else. But does the text lead you to believe that Job did something wrong? Jimbo, what is it?
His kids were rotten.
Okay, well, no, if the text doesn't say that. The text does not say that his kids were rotten.
I would say he did do wrong when he asked God why, because God said, do you know who I am and what I've created and everything? So did he do wrong by what came about him? No. But how he asked the Lord by thinking he could be Almighty, God's like, do you know who I am?
Okay,
I
that's a
am
good
the
that's a good
Alpha and the
insight. That's a good
Omega.
insight.
It was like the last little. Job was a great guy. There was just one little maybe speck of pride left right there, and that maybe that discipline and all that stuff that happened actually perfected him.
I would say that's a good idea.
The other thing is, like, Job was blessed.
You're very blessed.
He was given more children.
Okay, and that
Things for
that
his
is
hardships.
I want you to hold that in mind. She said, you probably couldn't hear her very well. I apologize. She said Job was incredibly blessed, and hold that in your mind for a second. Oh, Ella,
Thank
sorry, I thought you said Hayden.
I was just going to say that I think in the Bible it says something along the lines of not that God inflicted Job, but God allowed this to happen to Job, and there's a difference between the two.
Sure. Yeah, good point. Good point. Okay, so now, Thelma Lou.
I think for me, in my concept of walking this walk, God has a purpose for our lives. He has a plan for our lives. He has a path for our life. Without all those bad, so-called bad things that happen to us, we would not be people of integrity. We would not be people of character. We would not have faith. we would not have hope. We would not have love. He said, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. What happens in the valley of shadow of death? Duh. And who gets to walk through the valley of shadow? Everyone, right? But he carries us through those things, and those things build character in us. So when you get to the mountaintop, your perspective is like, oh my God, how did I get up here? Well, you went through the valley of the shadow of death. He's building in you the things that build character, and those are not always good things, so they seem, but they're building blocks and stepping stones.
That's a good insight. So Ella said something great, and you guys have all put in some really interesting ideas. And I'm not telling you the definitive truth. I'm just telling you there's a hint in the book of Job about something. I want you to think for just a moment about what happened to Job. What was taken away from him? Well, everything technically. Yeah, well, he lost his children, he lost his money, and he lost his health. And when these things happened, what did he say?
Came into the world.
He did, but first he said, that which I greatly feared has come upon me. That which I greatly feared has come upon me. You know, if you've been alive on this planet for any length of time at all, those are the three things you fear. I'm going to lose my money. I'm going to lose my children. I'm going to lose my health. Those are the things that every person is terrified of. And Job said, that which I greatly feared has come upon me.
And
what was Job's sin?
He did not fear the Lord.
He did not fear the Lord.
That is the only.
He feared the loss of the Lord's blessings. Those are very different things. Now, you tell me that you don't struggle with that. Therein is the wisdom that we need. Are you ready to give up your life? Are you ready to give up your children? Are you ready to give up your money? Are you ready to give up your health?
That makes him like Esau, who wanted the blessing. He didn't want the responsibilities. Job was responsible, but what Esau freaked out about was the fact that the blessing was gone. So that makes me nervous that it puts Job and Esau in the same box.
It makes me nervous. It should make every one of us nervous.
He says, to whom much is given, much is required.
That's correct. So, how blessed are you?
Very.
I'm very blessed. I'm very blessed, and I know you guys are too. But don't be afraid. You can't fear anything but God. That's really hard to do, especially in the days that we live in, where there is fear run amok. Fear run amok, especially in believers.
You know, and
Especially
yeah. Let me tell you. He asked me when he was asking me to be practical and do something that was for you guys. He says, "What do they need?" He says, "What is going on with them? What could you help them with?" And I was trying to think of you as a group, and I'm not picking on any one person, and you might not be. There's a couple of you that maybe not have this problem. And I said, they're afraid. And if that, you know, if you're like, oh, I'm not afraid. Okay, you're worried. That's a euphemism for fear. And anxiety, fear, anxiety, worry. You lay awake at night thinking about the loss of your health, your money, your family. It's fear. And I don't know what to say to...
I do.
Well, he said it over and over again. He said, do not be afraid. But you can't just say, so don't. Don't be afraid.
No, and you and I talked about that the other day. Jan, tell us what's up.
I just wanted to bring it back to the beginning when you opened, Angela, with talking about counseling and counselors. And of course, I need to comment on that. The fear or the intimidation or the not wanting to be judged or not wanting to be criticized or not wanting to be told what to do. It's a choice to only care about what the Lord thinks and to fear Him. And if we care more what the Lord thinks than we care about what the counselor thinks, that's a really good place to be at.
Yeah, it is.
That's the only place you can begin.
That's a great
Yeah,
opportunity.
the beginning of wisdom.
Yes. And I would say, frankly, that I would only have one piece of advice for you in regards to that. Because
But he knows you're not going to take it.
No, I'm hoping you will take it. Take it for what it's worth. Maybe it's wisdom, maybe it's not. You, having been involved in psychology for a lot of years, I'm fascinated by psychology and I've studied it for a long time. One of the things that I have discovered is you cannot stop negative thinking. It's not possible. I mean, you get some thought stopping used to be popular back in the day. It never worked. I'm just like all of you. I have all kinds of negative thoughts. You can't stop them. It's not possible to stop negative thinking. It's not possible to stop fearful thinking. Does anybody know what is the only way that you can?
You have to replace it.
You have to replace it.
If you don't replace it, it'll dominate
That's
your
right.
life.
You cannot stop negative, fearful thinking. You have to replace it. And that is why filling your mind with God's word is the only thing that works. The promises. And I was talking to Angela about that. That when I used to be, I don't know if you guys were aware of this, probably you are, but when I was 24 years old, I was stricken with severe anxiety. Had just panic attacks when I was 24.
Agoraphobia.
Been dealing with it for 25 years. Okay.
There were several months where he just did not leave the house at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would literally walk around in circles around my house with the Bible open, reading the book of Psalms. That was the only thing that calmed my spirit and took away my anxiety and my fear. And then repeatedly every morning, when that alarm goes off, the Bible app is opened up on the phone and I'm reading the words. I took my favorite, most encouraging Psalms about health and peace and strength and joy and salvation and deliverance and evil happening to them, but not to you. And I filled my mind with it. I filled a whole sheet with it, and I just read that whole thing. Now, can I arrogate to myself every single one of those commandments and nothing bad's going to happen to me because David said so? No, I cannot. So what's the use? I'd rather think positive than negative. So that when the negative does happen, and it will, there's no question about it, bad stuff's going to happen, you can go back to it and say, you know what? In this life or the next, he's going to deliver me.
It's what you do with it.
It is. And he has really, really delivered me in so many instances and given me so much encouragement, so much help, and so many blessings. It's not because I'm a good guy. I don't know why it is. I have no idea. You probably don't either. But it's been really, really good. And I can only thank him and try and fill my mind with his encouraging wisdom.
I know that as a kid growing up, and June can attest to this, our mom and dad, didn't really go much, but they sent us to the Baptist church. We learned the Bible, the straight word of God. And the scriptures that I know in my heart, I might not tell you the exact place to find them, but I can quote them verbatim. And I can mull them over in my mind day after day and pull from a lot of things, scriptures that I learned that help bring peace to your mind. And the scriptures that are in me are just like they're on the bottom of the house. So there's where I want him to build my house, is by his word. Will pull me out of anything that I'm in because of the word.
Angela, I apologize for taking over your teaching. You go, girl.
Well, I had finished.
Oh, okay. Anybody online want to share? Say anything? Ask any questions? I apologize for keeping you up late. That's all I wanted to say. Anything else? I think we can wrap up there. I hope it's encouraging to you. I so want you guys to be at peace in spite of whatever's happening around you or to you or for you. You might think it's happening to you, but it's actually happening for you. So just be encouraged as much as you can.
Read the Proverbs.
Read the Proverbs.
Be wise.
Yeah, read the Proverbs. Read the Psalms. Fill your minds with the good things. Well, let's pray, and we'll wrap this puppy up.